time, he's going to tell us another story. And it's a cryptic title, but I'll tell it to you. He says he's going to try to see if he can explain the difference between no and no. And the spelling there is K-N-O-W and N-O. So there is a difference. And Joe's going to try to explain it to us. So Joe, if you want to kick things off.
In 1966, I was at Purdue University on a Navy scholarship. I was 25 and I was single. One afternoon, I was sitting with a group of about a dozen people in an apartment, and one of them, Marjorie Brubaker, said that she was going to be moving from her apartment and moving into a house with two other girls. I didn't know her hardly at all. And so, but I said, I'll help you move if you'd like. And she says, well, I'll accept that if I can cook you a dinner. So I accepted the dinner. I came over the evening for the meal with high expectations because she was known as a very good cook. But the meal was not quite up to her standards. One problem was that she had forgotten about the chicken that was out on the grill. And you know, so it turned out a little brown. So I wanted to liven things up, so I said, I complimented her over and over and over again how great the salad was. And quite frankly, it was a very poor attempt at humor. After I helped her move, we actually started dating a little bit, and then more and more. And after about 4 months, I was in love. She was cute, she was very smart, she was independent, and she was a lot of fun to be with. So I did what I thought was the right thing to do, and I asked her to marry me. And oh, is that too soon? Anyway, she said, I don't know. And what I thought was better than no. So I said, well, I'd like to leave this proposal on the table. And so we continued dating. And about 6 months later, I graduated. And the answer was still, I don't know. So I said, we'll leave this proposal on the table, but while it's there, we can continue dating casually. But if one of us wants to develop a relationship with someone, then we'll take the proposal will come off the table. She said, fine. So fast forward for 4 years. I'm in the Navy. When I'm in port, we're calling each other twice a year. I'm coming out to visit her. Well, after about 5 years from the first proposal, I met Anne. Anne was cute. Anne was very smart. She was independent. And she was a lot of fun to be with. I said, I've got to take a proposal off the table so I can see about developing a relationship. So I'm getting ready to call Marge, and the phone rings. It's Marge. She's calling me. I said, I'm glad you called because I have something I've got to tell you. And she says, well, I have something to tell you too. And we went through you first. I said, I'll go first. I said, I've met someone that I'm interested in developing a relationship, and so I need to take the proposal off the table. And she said, this is awkward, because I called to say yes. Well, Albert Einstein wrote a formula that showed that time is relative, and I experienced the relativity of time. The right side of my brain continued a conversation with Marge, which was coherent enough that she stayed on the phone. In the meantime, my left brain is going 1,000 miles an hour, hyperspeed, trying to figure out what I'm going to do next. All of a sudden, my left brain directed my mouth to say, I wasn't sure what it was, Marge, I have one more question to ask you. She says, what's that? I said, I love you, will you marry me? Marge said, Yes. Well, you can imagine how happy we were at the time. Except for being separated by 1,000 miles, there was a certain amount of frustration there. But now, we've got to get married. But that's another story, so I'll have to end with that.
So our next story is also by a MOTH veteran. Eric Johansson has kind of endeared himself to us because we all remember his tortured sail across that stormy lake with the sputtering engine that could, and how it came back to him many years later. Well, thankfully he survived that ordeal because he's got another story for us, and this one, because he survived, is about his first job.
So it was 1973. I was 22 years old. I was an English creative writing major, and I got a job as a mental health worker at a hospital in Rhode Island that had just opened up, a day hospital for patients to be there during the day and go home at night. So obviously, as an English major, I knew very little about what I was getting into. And but I was surrounded by it. I got to go to group therapy and sit in the back and watch and listen. I got to go to psychiatric interviews and watch and listen. I got to meet some of the early founders of family therapy who came and did grand round lectures and that kind of thing. So it was a great job, and it was a small staff, so we got really close together, worked as a team with all of these patients. And one of the nurses, Nancy, after I'd been there a while, she said, "You know a little too much about this now. Sometimes you get in my way." But anyway, one of our jobs was to prepare lunch for the patients and to go to the kitchen, pick up the food, and work with them while they cooked. And the second part of that day was we would go out and do an organized recreational activity. One of those activities was I found an unlocked entrance to the tunnels that went under the hospital, and there was a old nursing classroom there, and I opened the closet and there was a skeleton. And then we would take walks along the Blackstone River and collect junk there and make junk sculptures. And the other activity that I really liked was playing volleyball. So one of those afternoons playing volleyball, I bent down and all of a sudden my pants ripped. From the zipper all the way up to my belt. So I grabbed the back of it and I sort of made my way back to the unit. And all the other staff were in their offices, fortunately. But Edith, the secretary, was there. I said, "Edith, what am I going to do?" She opened her drawer and picked out a sewing kit. So I snuck into the conference room and was there sewing my pants very carefully. Fortunately, my mother had taught me that skill. So I was sewing my pants, and I heard the keys jingle in the conference room. And in walked Nancy. I just, "Whoa, what are you doing?" Well, I explained the situation, and she turned red and left the room. And a few minutes later, I heard the keys jingle in the lock again. And in comes Louise, and she looks at me and said, "Nancy said you wanted to see me." I said, "Oh no, I have to sew my pants. You see, here's my underpants." And then I went back to sewing. And then a few minutes later, those keys were jingling in the conference room again. And in walked Margaretta, the social worker. And she just looked at me and turned around and walked out. So I finished sewing my pants and went back out, and we finished the day with a community meeting with the patients. And that Friday afternoon, we used to have wine and cheese, and I was the butt of the joke about wine and cheese that Friday. But on Monday morning, I brought an extra pair of pants that I kept at work for the rest of the time.
Yeah, so I don't know what was more harrowing, that storm on the lake or the conference room at the. All right, well, our third story, and then we'll take a little break and attack that massive. Can you believe how many desserts are over there? That's impressive. Our third story is also from a veteran, and Pamela told us a story last time about her adventures as a youth with her parents driving cross country, you might remember. This time, she seems to have recovered enough for us to hear another story, and this one is titled The Cottage. And I've allowed a prop for this one. And I'll allow pretty much anything if anybody would volunteer to tell me.
Okay, welcome. Good evening. I'm Pamela. And if you were here in January, you know that that was my first time I had a MOTH storytelling. And like Tom said, I promise I'm not 15. We're not going camping. And are you gluttons for punishment? I just thought I'd throw that out there. Anyway, my story is a two-parter. It's short, I promise. And it's called The Cottage. Back in 1950-51, my dad's great aunt, Auntie B, left him a piece of property in Saunders Point in Niantic. And Mom and Dad decided to build a small cottage for the summer, consisting of 4 small rooms, a large screened-in porch, and a potbelly stove to ward off those occasional dank summer days. And they invited all their close friends and family to come down and help build it and to stay. And on those warm spring and summer days and those couple of years, they would come down and Pratt and Whitney, where Dad and many of his co-workers, his colleagues worked, shut down, I guess, for a couple of weeks in the summer. And they pitched tents on the property and helped Daddy build the cottage. And it was an open door policy. Anybody and everybody could show up, especially if you had a hand in building the cottage. It was as much your cottage as it was ours. And the cottage was built on a tiny little dead-end street, and there were 2 other cottages on there. And we didn't have a telephone. And Nana Adams had a cottage across the street. And she told my parents, "Now don't you folks go out and spend the money on getting a phone for the summer. If you need to use the phone, you come over and use our phone. And if somebody needs to get a message to you, I'll send Fred over." Now, Fred was her grown son, and he and his wife Irene also spent the summer at the cottage. Now, to a little girl of 3, Fred was ancient. I mean, he had to be at least 50. But we didn't dare get a phone. We didn't want to hurt Nana Adams' feelings. And besides, we didn't really need a phone. We never knew who was going to show up for the weekend or during the summer. Well, at least my big sisters and I and my dad didn't know who was going to show up. My mom always did. She had a feeling, a perception, a sixth sense of who was coming. She'd say, "Oh, we haven't seen the Osborns." And the Osborns would drive in Friday night and carry in a big stack of sheets and towels and a big pot of food to share. And then she'd say, "Oh, we haven't heard from the Trompleys." And the Trompleys would pull in Saturday morning in their big station wagon and their 6 kids, and we'd spend the day at the beach. And this is how it usually went. The moms and kids would pile into some station wagons, and in those days, McCook Point had, their pass was like the size of a credit card made out of like cardboard, and you show it to the guard who was sitting in a folding chair with a clip-on umbrella for the shade, and show it to him, and he'd wave you on by. And as we went into the parking lot, one of the kids would jump out of the station wagon and run up the hill and pass it on to the next station wagon. And then the other car would run, drive around and come into the parking lot. Probably one reason why McCook went to stick on parking. The men generally stayed behind to help Daddy with the project he was working on. Daddy was always working on some project. And then they'd go sailing in Daddy's small wooden sailboat, either on the Nyack River or out in the Sound. The sailboat was painted pink. That's a whole other story. We won't go into that right now. And then we would gather in the big screened-in porch and pull out this humongous old wooden table that seemed to have like 100 leaves, surrounded by a massive, mismatched wooden chairs, and talk about potluck. I mean, nobody ever went hungry. And can you imagine a better way for a kid to spend summers? But occasionally, Mom would say, we haven't seen the Norrises, or, oh, we haven't heard from the Welches. So, Friday night, we'd be looking for the Norrises and Welches, and they would show, and we'd kind of Google at Mom, and she'd give us a grin. Saturday morning, we'd be looking for them, and we didn't see them, and so we'd kind of snicker, and she'd give us a look. And Saturday afternoon, no Norrises, no Welches. We didn't look for them Sunday morning because we knew they'd be at church. It said Sunday afternoon, we'd be picking up after our busy weekend, and all of it, and Mom would be standing at the kitchen sink scrubbing the last of the big pots of food that we had shared. And who should drive into the driveway? As my big sisters and I stared out the windows with our eyes and mouths wide open in surprise, and my dad standing there shaking his head. Mom would turn to us and grin, set down her dish rag, push open the screen door, and go out and greet them. She was always right. Now, this is a picture Mommy took of the cottage in 1955, and already some changes has taken place. The potbelly stove is gone, so I remember that potbelly stove really well, and I couldn't have been more than 3. And you can see, I'm having a hard time with but there's a brick chimney built. Daddy had a brick fireplace and chimney added. That in itself, the story of the fireplace and the chimney is another story we won't go into. Okay, and this is the house in which I raised my daughters and where I continue to live today. Now, this door is this door, and this chimney is this chimney. Now you can see that over the last 70 years there's been a few additions and modifications and remodels done. Though in the last 30, I must admit, it's been mostly upkeep and repairs. But when I stand in what was the screened-in porch and look out the window every day, I thank Annie B. and God every day for my many blessings for the cottage.
In an exercise of extreme bravery, we had a last-minute scratch, and a new storyteller, Kate Johnson, agreed to fill in with no advance notice. So I'm very appreciative that she's willing to take on a little impromptu story for us. And this one is an interesting one. The title of it is "We Found Him," but him is spelled H-Y-M-N. So you can ponder that one. Go ahead.
So it starts in September of 2005, and my husband Dave and I had just recently moved from Old Lyme to East Haddam. And that's an important part of the story, but I'm going to give you a little background first. So I grew up in the 1970s, the youngest of 5 kids in Wilmington, Delaware, a suburban neighborhood, Irish, half Italian, and very Catholic. And every Sunday, we'd go to St. Mary Magdalene Church. The kids, they'd round us all up into the car. And we did holy days of obligation and confirmation and baptism and first communions and you name it, brace every night. We were into it. Well, my parents were into it. I would say the kids found it a little bit more of a chore, but it was definitely part of our family fabric. And it was very core to the foundation of who my parents were. And then, as we all grew up and got married and moved away, most of us left our religion in the rearview mirror. And my parents, to their credit, they never lectured us or pressured us or really pushed it on us. But I've got to admit that, 5 kids, 20 years of church, not one of them goes on to practice. I think they were probably a little disappointed. So then I was introduced to the First Congregational Church of Old Lyme through my husband, Dave, through his family. And it was a sad occasion because it was 1999 and it was a memorial service for his father. And this church was like mind-boggling to me. It was like no other version of religion I had ever seen. And some of you probably remember David Good. Oh, yeah. And I remember him explaining to me that this church thinks of it as like a journey. He even said to me, you don't even have to necessarily believe in God. Gee, I thought that was kind of a minimum requirement. Okay, that's interesting. So I found it fascinating, and Dave and I decided that year to join the church. And when my mom would come up and visit from Delaware, she would give up the Catholic hat and join us at the Congregational Church. And she too was very fond of David Good's sermons and the congregation. So now, the important part, back to September 2005. We had moved in July to East Haddam. And the commute from this church to East Haddam and this church to Buttonball Road, where we live now, it's different. So it was early September, and we were going to church, and I probably underestimated how long it was going to take to get from East Haddam down here. So we were running late. And it was busy, because it's Sunday school day that starts. So my mother and I snuck in just as the doors were closing, and the first floor, no pews. So we go upstairs, and the choir's there in full force. It was pretty crowded up there, too. So we managed to tuck ourselves into 2 seats that are in the upper right corner. They're nestled right in there. And then just as the music began to start, we didn't have a hymnal because there were none on the bench and you don't have anything in front of you. So a nice gentleman from the choir turns around with an extra hymnal and extends his arm to my mother for the hymnal. She opens it up looking for the song to sing. And she sees a dedication that says, in loving memory of Joseph L. Donnelly, Joe. Joseph L. Donnelly is my father, and her husband who had passed some 10 years earlier. And so you may recall, some years before that, the church got new hymnals. And when they did, they offered to the congregants that you could dedicate hymnals. So Dave and I decided, since both of our fathers had passed, that this would be a lovely tribute for them. So we got one for each of them. Now mind you, before that day, we'd never seen either one of them. And then the amazingness of on that day, that hymnal, in that weird seat, and that my mother was visiting from 250 miles away, he handed her that one. Wow. And she looked at me and she said, do they all say this? So, sadly, we've never seen Joe again. And even more sadly, we've never found Philip P. Johnston, my husband's father, Phil. So a challenge for you all when you come to service. I'm encouraging you all to please look for Phil and Joe. And if you see them, tell them we say hey. We love you and we miss you. Thank you.
There's just no explaining these bizarre twists in the universe, right? Crazy.
Aliens.
Well, thank you. Somebody who attended the science lecture, yes, it could have been alien. All right, so our next storyteller is a long-term church member, everybody knows. But she's a first-time MOTH storyteller, so this is her first effort, and that's Carolyn Randall, so thank you very much, Carolyn, for joining us. And she has an interestingly titled story. It's called The Worst Vacation I Ever Loved.
I was born and raised here in Connecticut, but in 1973, my husband and kids moved to Colorado. We loved the mountains, the view. It was just gorgeous out there. We did a lot of camping. But one year, we decided that we were going to go try a new adventure. We rented a houseboat on Lake Mead, and it happened to be on my birthday, which is today. Which I find that a remarkable coincidence that we're doing this on my birthday. And this trip was for my 33rd birthday, so that was quite a while ago. So it was March of 1981, and we drove there with a little pop-up trailer. And when we got to Lake Mead, we had reserved a houseboat, but they'd given away the one that we reserved because we got there a little late. So he said, well, we have one left. It sleeps 10. The thing was huge. And we're not boaters. We've never done any boating. So we said, okay, we're going to take it. We got all this way. We're going to go ahead and take it. And the manager there gives us all the do's and don'ts of what you're supposed to do. Okay, yep, beautiful weather. This was in March, but it was like, 80 degrees there. This is, in Utah. So we head out, and what do? We start doing all the things that he told us not to do. We decided to pull into a cove, and we got stuck on a sandbar, which he warned us. These coves have sandbars. You could get stuck. Well, my husband keeps trying to get off of it by doing reverse, and ends up losing reverse because he did it so much that he just, so then we had no reverse, and we're like, this is before cell phones. We had no way of contacting anybody. This lake is huge. There's nobody living around it. There's no houses or anything. So we're like, okay, what are we gonna do? We saw the water was shallow, so we decided we'd get out and push the boat so it was facing the right direction so we could go out. And it worked beautifully. We were surprised at the size of that boat that once we got it in motion, it just went right around. And then we were able to hop back on the boat. I was much younger and thinner then. Okay. We also didn't bother to check how big this lake was and how long it would take to get to the marina on the other end where we were meeting friends that were flying in from Las Vegas. So we had to keep going because we were heading for there. Well, we went, starting getting dark. The guy had told us, don't boat in the dark, you have no running lights. And there are no lights around, it's pitch black. And we're like, oh my God, we've got to keep going. So I'm out on the front with a big flashlight, watching for boulders, because there was a lot of big boulders there, thinking, oh my God, we're going to crash into something. And we kept going and going and going. It was like 8 o'clock before we got to the other end. I thought we'd never get there. All right, so we get there. We asked these fishermen in a boat when we came into the marina, where can we tie up? We have no reverse, so we don't want to pull into a slip, we won't be able to get out. He said, oh, just tie up to this buoy right here, you'll be fine. Okay, he said, they said they'd go tell the people at the marina. We were tired at that point. We ate supper and we went to bed. And that was it, right? Hours later, all of a sudden we're hearing this bang, 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 real loud on the boat. I'm like, what the heck? I had a 1-year-old with me. I did not want them waking the baby up. So I go out there to get them before he's woke up, and it's a park ranger. And he's telling us, it's against the law to tie up to a channel marker. and I went, channel marker? I don't know. He said, that thing you're tied to with a blinking red light. Oh. So we're like, okay. And then I'm looking around and I'm saying, I don't even see the lights for the marina anymore. We had drifted down the lake a good 2 miles, dragging the thing with us. And he says, you've got to bring it back right now. I said, but we have no running lights. And this ranger just rolled his eyes like, oh my God, renters. And he said, just follow me. So he led us so that we know which way we're going, showed us where to put it back, because we wouldn't have any idea where to put it. And then we went into a slip and said, okay, well, good, all right, we're settled for the night. The next day, we were shocked that they sent a repair boat for our boat. They just had this hoist that took the bad engine out without reverse and put a new one in. Obviously, they have this problem a lot. But we were just shocked about that. Our friends arrived, and we had 2 beautiful days on the lake, fishing, swimming. It was beautiful. Okay, so we say goodbye to our friends. We're heading back to the other end of the lake again, knowing that this time we better not lollygag because it's a long way. Well, we had a little small rowboat with us so the guys could go fishing without taking the whole big boat with us. On the way down, we had it on the back of the boat because the boat was big enough we could do that. No, my husband decided, no, we'll just, tow it behind us with the rope. It'll be fine. No, he was trying to go faster, and the way this dumb thing, the rope broke, the thing tipped over, oil can that way, oars this way, and he's going, and you're like, I had to stay on the boat. I can't very well leave my kids on the boat with him running. He jumps in. Fortunately for us again, there were some fishermen in a small boat there that were very nice. They jumped in, helped us round everything up, get it up on the back of the boat like we should have done. And we were very, very grateful. And when we got to the other end, we thought we were going to be charged extra for all these boo-boos. No, nothing. But that's not the end of it. Now we're heading home, and my husband decided to take a shortcut that he saw on a map. Well, this shortcut was nothing but, you couldn't even call it a road. It was a couple of ruts with, it was terrible. And we're out in the middle of nowhere. And I'm like, oh my God. Well, we had a flat tire. Not on the car, but on the trailer. And, well, we're like, nothing's around. We've got to keep going. So we did. We found this little bitty town that had a place that was the gas station, restaurant, and post office all in one. And the guy was great there. Helped my husband get it fixed, except it was very difficult because the rim had bent for this horrible road we were on, because we kept riding on it. They had to go to the next small town to fix it. We didn't get out of there till late, so we stayed at a hotel, which we weren't planning to. We come out in the morning, and there's another flat tire. It's gone flat again. We're like, managed to get it inflated. Head out, almost home, and it went again. That was it. My husband said, "To hell with it." He unhitched the trailer and left it. There was these pull-offs that you could go, and we were in the mountains at that point. There was some pull-off that he could pull off. He unhitched that thing. He said, I'll come back tomorrow and fix it. I am not dealing with another flat tire. The truth of it was, we just had been given that trailer. And if he had checked, the tires were pretty rotten from sitting for a long time. He should have checked the tires before we left. But I have to say, the reason I love this vacation was one of the nights that we were there with our friends. My little one was starting to fuss. I didn't want him to wake everybody up in the boat. So I took him out on this deck that goes all the way around. It was beautiful out. I mean, it was like at least midnight, but it was warm. There was a full moon that was shining on the water. When you look up out west, you can see 1,000,000 stars, many more than you can here in the east because of light pollution and everything. I just couldn't keep my eyes off it. And quiet. You could hear the fish jumping. It was so quiet. It was like the most peaceful thing to experience. It was wonderful. And I couldn't help but think of God. And I said, thank you, God, for all this beauty in Mother Nature, all the things He gives us in Mother Nature. I feel like He gives us those moments to help make up for all the bad stuff that's always going on in our lives, you know, in general. It gives us that little moment of peace, and it was the best, the best. I'll never forget that night.
Yes, thanks goodness for those moments of peace amid the chaos. That's what preserves us. Our next storyteller is not a stranger to any of you. Pete is, of course, an anchor of the bass section for, what are we going on, 60 years? No, sorry, for a while. Anyway, Pete is also a veteran of the MOTH stage, and he's agreed to come back and tell us one more story. And this one is Church Tales with My Truck. Well, we'll see where that goes.
Hey, so the last time I spoke was in the summertime, and I told a story about how I kind of stumbled into this building to attend AA meetings, and then stumble into the church and had an epiphany, and then I wound up joining the choir a mere 35 years ago. I'm a newcomer. There are people that have been longer than me. But I have 3 vignettes that I would like to share. The first one is when I first started attending choir rehearsal. It didn't happen all the time, but it wasn't an uncommon event where Carlene would walk up to me and say, hey, what are you doing tomorrow? And so before you think that I'm picking on Carlene, I love you as if you were my big sister. And she was basically doing what I asked her to do. In AA, the symbol for AA is a circle with a triangle in the middle of it. And the 3 legs of the triangle are unity, recovery, and service. And for service, as far as AA is concerned, but it's actually true in life, is when you give freely of yourself and expect nothing in return. So I was newly sober, and all my friends who drank really didn't want much to do with me. I was working rotating shifts, so it's a very irregular schedule, so I didn't have much opportunity to make friendships and relationships with like normal people. So the choir kind of became my family of sorts. And what Carlene was doing, she was in possession of knowing the needs of people in the choir, and I was a resource. I had a truck. I was not married, so I didn't have familial obligations. I worked crazy hours, but 2 weeks out of 4, I wasn't working 9 to 5. so I could help. And I don't know how many people from the choir I moved into Matt Ely's house on Ball Road and Old Shore Road. Must have been 5, I don't know. It's because I had time, and I discovered that it helped me feel like I was contributing to a group of people that put up with me. I had very, very low esteem at that time. And they kept welcoming me back, you know. I thought it was just because I had a truck, but it actually, they thought otherwise. The second little vignette, if you've been at this church for a bit, you are likely to be aware that in July, there's this little event, sometimes known as the White Elephant Sale. And I had a truck. So, you know, back in when I was a young kid, that was a long time ago, we didn't hire movers to move all the furniture from Noyes Barn down to here. We did that. And so I would take a vacation day so I could help set up the White Elephant Sale, the furniture department. Then I'd work in a furniture department, and then I would use my truck and move everything back over to the barn. So, Mike Gentry, I'm sorry to tell you, I no longer have that truck. He would call me every May, and I had his name and caller ID. So I knew it was him, and we worked together, so I recognized his voice. And the first thing he would say was, "Do you still have your truck?" Wouldn't be hello, how are you doing? I haven't seen you in a while. No, you still have a truck. So that means for White Elephant Sale, I'm gonna have to help you over in the barn.
Oh, yeah. You still
Okay. The third one is back in the mid-1990s. Before this building existed, there was a garden here that had boxwoods and flowers. It was glorious. And the church community decided we were going to build an addition. You know, they did plans, we voted on it, donations, blah, 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 blah. Years later, they finally said, we're going to start construction on Monday. Excellent. Everybody's really excited until someone said, what about the garden? 2 days before was a wedding, and the bride was not going to be happy if we dug up her garden. So that meant she had her wedding. Sunday came, we were in church, and then a bunch of volunteers with their trucks showed up to start digging up some boxwoods and start digging up some flowers and all that stuff. Someone had rototilled a spot over at the parsonage where we could plant all this stuff because it was going to be a few years before we were going to get it back in the ground. So I actually teamed up with Chuck and Louise Lynch, who are longtime members. Chuck was in the choir, so I knew him. I didn't really know his wife all that much at the time. And so we kind of worked together, and we're digging up all these boxwoods and put them in the back of my truck. We're getting filthy. Bringing the stuff over, planting them in the... We came back, it started to rain. It's like, oh my God, what are we gonna do? Well, everybody else is kind of going away. And I told Chuck they were gonna leave their car, because they were covered in mud. They were gonna leave their car. They had another one at home. They were going to go home, clean up, and come back and get their car and trash it. I had a truck, so yeah, okay, we can do that. As we're walking out there was a rose bush, a really ancient rose bush. 2 of them, actually. And as we're walking by, I went, we can't leave this rose bush alone. The tractors are going to run it over, are going to kill it. So Louise is clipping off all the vines. Chuck is digging with his shovel. I'm with a trowel because I don't want to hurt the root. Covered in mud. We dug up 2 roots about this big each, brought them over there, we planted them. Then when they got back in, they would not get in my truck. They rode in the bed. The plan was to go home, take their clothes off at the back door, hose themselves off, go into the house, kind of clean up, and then kind of take care of themselves. I had vinyl seats. I'm like, come on. No, that's what they were going to do. Well, several years later, this structure now exists, and it's time to do landscaping for the garden over here. At that particular time, I was working 70-hour weeks, so I was not involved. But you can recognize there are 2 rose bushes out there, and I believe that I had something to say about those bushes being there. Thank you.
Thank you, Pete. And Mike, just for your information, I bike to church. No truck. So, do you want to give it a shot, or? Dennis, you want to give it a shot? So we have a late volunteer. Dennis said he'd chip in and give us a short story. And so I said, come on up. And then we'll have one final wrap up, and that should do it for tonight.
So I'm about 12 years old, and for Christmas I got a new flexible flyer. As a younger one, I had a smaller one, but as I was growing, I needed a bigger. And so anyway, I got this new sled. So the family, I'm a little background. I'm from a small town of 2,200 people up in northeastern Pennsylvania. And it was mostly farmers and stuff around. And so every Monday night, the ritual was that we went to our local farmer and we got a gallon of milk. And it usually took a little while to go get the milk, and it was a friend of my dad. And so anyway, do I have my homework done? Yes. Okay, you can go and we'll take the sled and maybe we'll find a thing. So back in those days, we had a lot of snow. And my dad always liked to go the back roads. And so there was this old dirt road that had a very long hill on it. So we go get our milk, we come back, and Dad said, maybe we can go do a sleigh ride down this old dirt road that's now plowed, big snowbanks on either side. So my dad parks the car at the top of the hill, leaves the lights on. The hill is at least a good half mile long. We go zipping, the 2 of us get on my new flexible flyer. We go flying down the hill, and it goes around a curve, and now there's no lights, but oh boy, that was fun. So anyway, now we gotta climb back up the hill. So we're climbing back up the hill, and we're looking at the car lights are still on, and gee, the car looks like it's getting closer to us. And so, we're still trudging up the hill, and oh, that thing looks like it's coming down the hill. So, sure enough, we're getting up close to it. The car slid off into the snowbank. No problem. We hopped back on the sled, and I got 2 sleigh rides out of that trip. So anyway, that was just a fun story of sleigh riding in the snow when there really was a lot of snow.
So can anybody verify, do they still make flexible flyers? Yes, they still make them? Yeah, I had one too. Love those things. Yeah, classic. Thank you. So for our final little wrap up, I've been berated by a number of you that I let Joe escape leaving us with that cliffhanger about what happened after the proposal was accepted. So I pressed on Joe to come wrap that up for us. And he's got a little mini sequel to let us know how that all concluded. So for a first in MOTH history, a double story.
Well, as I said earlier, at the end, we've got to get married. A shotgun is not involved, but we're anxious. So we start talking right that evening, or day on the phone, and trying to figure out what we're going to do. Within the next couple of days, we have our plan pretty much worked out. My dad had grown up near London, Ontario. Marge grew up around Waterloo and Niagara Falls, and a lot of the family was there. So we said, we'll get married in Waterloo. And we'll get married in December 27th, because that will be between semester break for Marge, and I can get off leave, being in the Navy. And so that's what we decided. Now, we decided that around the 1st of October. And so didn't seem to be much of a problem. So we started working on the plans. And Marge went out and bought the rings. She went out, she worked with her brother and sister-in-law in Waterloo and got the chapel, got the minister, got the reception hall, got the wedding cake, and everything. And about that time I said, well, maybe I should do something. So I basically put together the wedding plan or program, which included a hymn that Marge's grandfather had written for his bride, and also a poem from Khalil Gibran on marriage. And but Marge had done so much more, I thought I should do something more. So I said, I will take care of the weather. I will guarantee there's no snow. Unfortunately, I didn't think that far ahead, because the ice storm that came December 27th, had an impact. Anyway, we finally get together. We have the marriage, everything, the wedding, the reception, everything went as planned. It was perfect. Of course, it was Marge's planning, so that's explains that. And after the reception, we make it over to her brother's house, put all the wedding presents in the car, and we take off. We're going to go to Detroit, and from there go on a honeymoon. Well, the ice storm. The roads are so bad, we had to pull off at the first motel that we came to, and probably the worst motel in Ontario. Think of the Bates Motel in Cycle. The next morning, the roads are clear, and so we take off, and once we get to the border to Detroit, they say, what do you have to declare? We say, we have wedding presents. Off to the office. So he sent us over to the office, and the customs agent said, what do you have to declare? We said, wedding presents. He says, well, I need a list and the price of everything there. So Marge had the list for writing thank you notes. That was not a problem. So we took a look at the list, so-and-so, and what they gave. So we took a look at this bowl, and we came up with a high and a low range of what we thought that might cost. And then we said, well, is this from a single person or a couple? And how much money do they have? Are they going to spend a lot, or are they just going to get us something nice? And so we're laughing, we're having a good time putting this list together. And we hadn't seen our custom agent for a while. All of a sudden, an older gentleman comes by and says, that's all. We didn't know what he meant, so we kept on going. Finally, he said, get out of here, leave. He didn't. Apparently, their regulations didn't cover a married couple coming over with all these household items. One is a U.S. citizen, one is a Canadian citizen, because the rules are different. So I guess we just didn't exist. So we get across the border. The next day, we take off on our honeymoon. We fly down to Bahamas, had a great honeymoon, come back to Detroit. And Marge gets in her car, and she heads back to Indiana. I get in my car, and I head to Portsmouth, New Hampshire. And Marge had another semester that she had to teach because she'd been on a sabbatical. And so friends of mine said, "What's going on here? I thought you got married." I said, "Well, we did, but you know how things are nowadays where a lot of couples are living together and deciding whether they're going to get married? We got married, and we're going to decide whether we're going to live together." 5 months later, we did. We started living together. And we had 47 and a half years of a wonderful marriage, which goes to show that patience and persistence can lead to unimaginable rewards.
Well, thank you, Joe, for wrapping that up. Otherwise, we would have had like 3 months of torture between the next, thinking about how this all worked out. But what a wonderful story. So that wraps up our stories for this evening, people. And again, thank you for so many people turning out. This is really wonderful. Some of you, if you want to be on the mailings when I send around please, and when I'm begging for future storytellers, if you want to be on that list or just to be informed of what's coming next, there's a sign-up sheet in the back, and if I have your email, I'll be sure to put you on the list, and you'll be in the loop. But it's wonderful seeing you all, and thank you for coming out.